The universe and classes of vanilla World of Warcraft were made a long time before information was so widely shared on the internet, before guides, BIS lists, min-maxing or anything like that was nearly as commonplace. These things have definitely started to happen more over the course of its duration, especially during Classic and beyond, but originally it was all about the game, the classes, and the world. The developers were just a bunch of guys putting stuff in this massive universe that they thought would be cool or appealing to players, no worries about whether something would get too degenerate or whether the grind would be too long. It was truly a different time, and from the alpha to the beta to the release of World of Warcraft, the classes we all know so well underwent a ton of changes, with new abilities being added and other ones removed. And nowadays on our standard patch 1.12 version of vanilla that we're used to, we very much know what to expect. Who does the most damage, who levels the fastest, who farms gold the best, and so on. And though classes have so many cool and unique abilities, or even ones which are just for fun, such as Eyes of the Beast, there are also some rather questionable things which still exist in this version of the game. Those abilities, whether you have to consider whether you're actually going to be buying them from your class trainer, or the talents which you've probably never taken unless you've misclicked them somehow. Those are the things that I want to go over today. What for me have to be 10 of either the worst class abilities or talents that exist in vanilla World of Warcraft. We'll start with some not so bad ones, but things which are hard to find a use with, and then we'll finish on some abilities or talents which I'm not honestly sure how they still exist in the state they're in. I've also tried to pick things from as many different classes as possible where I think they're fair choices. So with all that said, let's make a start. First up, I have what will be the only entry that I thought I could include from the warrior on this list, since the warrior's toolkit in general is pretty good. I was close to picking Rend here, but it does get some use in the early game, and it can stop rogues from re-stealthing in PvP, so it does have some niche uses. It's a talent I want to pick for the warrior though, and one which feels unfortunately misplaced, so it's difficult to invest your points in it when you can pick other weapon types, and I'm talking about polearm specialization. The problem with this talent is how low down it is on the arms tree. See, for the other weapon types you can start putting points into them after having spent a total of 20 points in the talent tree, so you can get the rest of the best talents in the arms tree and then begin spending the rest on Fury. However, with polearm specialization you need a minimum of 25 points in the arms tree before you can start leveling it, and that just makes it super awkward to fit into any build which I'd feel good about running. On top of that, there are a few other, let's say, meta problems which add to this talent rarely being taken, such as humans preferring maces or swords, and orcs axes for their racial weapon skill bonuses, and these bonuses are still nice even at a leveling phase of the game when fighting enemies who are a higher level than you. And then of course there are options such as Whirlwind Axe or Bonebiter which kind of dominate the mid-game portion of WoW. There isn't even a lack of good polearms in the game either if you look what's available, it just feels hard to get good use out of them. In the Burning Crusade, Blizzard combined polearm spec with axe spec into the creatively named Poleaxe specialization, which just increases your crit chance by 5% with either weapon equipped. And perhaps if this happened in vanilla you wouldn't feel so bad about committing to going polearm on a warrior. Either way, due to poor talent placement and people generally favouring other weapon types, polearm spec gets the 10th spot here. Before we go on, a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Boo.dev. Boo.dev is a platform dedicated to teaching back-end web development from start to finish in the Python, Go and SQL programming languages. Where it sets itself apart is that Boot doesn't want you staring at endless boring pages, so they've designed this learning experience as though it's an RPG where you're in charge of the pace at which the action happens. It has features you're going to be pretty familiar with, such as daily goals, achievements and leaderboards. And above all, Boot.dev wants to get you hands on writing your own code, understanding how projects are built and gaining insight into the world of programming. There's plenty of help available on your learning journey too. Boot has an AI tool to help you understand what you're learning via asking questions about your problem rather than just handing you the answers outright if you are stuck. But as you progress you will unlock pages in your spellbook, which is a bit of a cheat sheet of notes and links to refer back to for help as well. And Boot believes in getting a solid understanding of the fundamentals and taking your time is key in this field of work, and if it does prove to be something for you, it is well paid with experience and often has remote working opportunities too. So if it sounds good, why not give them a go? You can go to boot.dev and try out their courses for free, and then use my code Willie to get 25% off your entire first year, should you choose the annual plan. Many thanks to boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get on back to WoW. Next up for you, I have the addition from the Shaman. Now, Shaman has some abilities which don't really see all that much use. For real, how often have you ever used Frostbrand Weapon or Flame Tongue Totem, for example? Probably not all that often. But there is one ability which I'm not even convinced that I've seen anyone get any good use out of it, and that is Wind Wall Totem. As one of your air totems, Wind Wall blocks a certain amount of damage from a ranged attack specifically. Not melee, not any form of magic, literally just ranged attacks. Now, Shaman's other damage mitigation totems such as Stone Skin and especially the elemental resistance totems are really good, so I guess Blizzard thought they would make something to mitigate ranged damage too to round out the toolkit, but I just don't know what you're supposed to do with this. The first problem it has is that it's an air totem. Do you know what else is an air totem? Wind Fury. And practically anytime you are grouped with a Shaman ever, you'll be wanting to drop Wind Fury because it's such a massive DPS gain. The second thing is that totem ranges are a bit iffy at times. They're not always where you expect them to be, and if you drop this in range of whatever's shooting at you, you may end up just getting close enough to be in melee range a few seconds later, which rather defeats the point of using Windwall Totem and spending mana on it. So really, the ideal scenario for Windwall Totem is you need to be being attacked from range but unable to close the gap fast, you don't need to swap to Wind Fury, and, well, ideally the ranged attackers aren't doing all that much damage because Windwall blocks a flat amount of damage, so it really doesn't do anything against heavy hitters. So do you have any ideas where this would be useful? Perhaps the only place I can think of is Cannon Master Willie, cool name that guy, the boss with the cannon in Strat Living. He calls in adds which attack rapidly with range for moderate damage, which you're meant to clear up by using the cannons, but assuming that nobody does the mechanics and just fully focuses the boss, Windwall Totem might just be BIS mitigation here. So I think that kind of explains why Windwall Totem deserves a spot on this list. Next up we have the entry from the Priest, and Priest overall is a fantastic class in vanilla. They were difficult to find something for. They're a very strong and safe leveler for hardcore, they're a great healer at endgame, and they're amazing at PvP as Shadow. They have all the bases covered. So the class didn't have too many weird abilities which I could pick apart, other than one in particular, because for Priest the choice has to be the final talent in the Holy Tree, Lightwell. Now, I don't know what Blizzard had with Lightwell and making it just unreasonably bad, but even in TBC it was still super lackluster and found very few uses. However, in vanilla it's a whole other level of bad. So Lightwell is an ability that you place down on the ground and afterwards people can click on it to receive healing over 10 seconds. It has a short cast time and is also very cheap mana-wise for the amount of healing it provides, which doesn't sound too bad. But then we get to the downsides. First up is that this thing for some unknown reason has a 10-minute cooldown and only provides 5 charges of its healing effect, meaning barely anyone is ever going to get much use out of it. The second big issue is that if you take any damage whilst the Lightwell heal is active, it will be cancelled. So this makes this end of talent tree ability pretty much first aid with a 10-minute cooldown. And finally, any priest who has tried to use a Lightwell will know this, it's more or less impossible to actually get people to click on the Lightwell after they have A, just taken damage, B, will not be taking damage again for a while, and C, don't end up getting healed by another healer. They even kept the whole Lightwell heal gets cancelled when you take damage part in TBC, and it still had a 6-minute cooldown. For some reason Blizzard just kept this talent really bad for a really long time, so all in all, Lightwell has to be the pick for Priest here. Next up we have the Druid entry. You know, when I was going over what talents and abilities to include for the video, Druid could have had quite a few entries by itself. That was when I decided I should probably include some other classes so I'm not just picking on them. But Druid definitely has some questionable abilities and talents. But their first appearance on the list is a talent Improved Moonfire, which increases the damage of this ability and crit chance of it by 10%. Moonfire is definitely one of the more iconic Druid abilities. I mean, who hasn't won a PvP fight with just Moonfire spam? That being said, it definitely has one or two problems. First is the high mana cost for what the spell does, partially because it's instant cast, partially because a good deal of the spell's power is in its damage over time effect, and if you're spamming it, obviously you don't benefit from the damage over time portion. Second is that, of course, damage over time effects don't crit in vanilla, and there's, well, kind of just more or less no haste effects for them to benefit from either. So if you deal damage in vanilla, you really don't want it to be damage over time, you want direct damage. And then we get to the improved Moonfire talent in the balance tree. Now, to be honest, the top half of the balance tree is just on the meh side, but improved Moonfire is essentially a mandatory 5-point talent sync so you can get access to Vengeance, which at max rank increases the damage bonus of your spell crits by 100%, which is good. I mean, as good as you can get when you're playing Boomkin, but it's still good. But you have to waste so many points to get to the good stuff in the balance tree that it really doesn't feel as satisfying to advance down as many other talent trees do. Overall though, improved Moonfire is kind of just a symptom of a strange talent tree for balance druids. There are a lot of ideas going on here, and most of them don't really pay off, and having to sink 5 points into a talent where only half of the spell can benefit from the crit modifier can only be described as a vanilla druid moment. Following druid at number 6 is the first pick from the hunter, because they are going to be making a repeat appearance as well. Hunter's in such a unique spot in vanilla with pets, training, ammo, the dead zone, and all the various mechanics they have to worry about, which no other class really has to. Anyways, my first pick for the hunter is going to be one of the AoE abilities in volley. Now, to be fair, hunter has a whole side to it in vanilla, which is fine whilst leveling, but then you get to the endgame, your gear begins to scale, and you just don't use these abilities again. And what I'm talking about are your hunter abilities that do spell damage and scale with spell power, your fire-based traps in immolation and explosives, serpent sting, arcane shot, and of course, volley. There is of course the spell power hunter thing that you may have heard of, where you stack spell power to increase the damage of these abilities along with survival talents, but it is really bad. I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually play it, ever. Hunters of course traditionally need agility and ranged attack power above anything else to deal damage, so all these spell power abilities just fall off incredibly hard. They were even still bad in the Burning Crusade as well. Blizzard only started to give attack power scaling to spells in Wrath, at which point things such as Explosive Trap became arguably super overpowered. But volley is perhaps just the worst of Hunter's spell power abilities, which is why I'm picking it. Not only will it not be scaling with any stats you're building, it suffers from spell knockback, it has a high mana cost, its base damage is really bad, even its spell damage scaling is bad, and for some reason it has a 1-minute cooldown, and it's channeled as well. It's just overall a super subpar spell, and leaves Hunter's AoE capabilities as, well, you can just press multi-shot and yeah, that's about it I guess. A complete side note here, but I hope for Season of Discovery that Blizzard would have turned survival into the spell power hunter tree, where they actually care about stacking this stat to increase their damage over making them into a melee hunter. I think it would have been interesting to see how this unusual way of playing the class could work if it was really embraced, but this was probably out of the scope of what they had time to be doing in Season of Discovery. Either way, if survival changes in a significant way in the future, I still hope it goes down the spell power route rather than this whole melee thing. Also, it would be a reason to equip spell power mail on Alliance as a bonus. But overall for Hunter, I think that explains why I'm picking volley. At number 5, we have the entry from the Rogue. The Rogue in vanilla is generally a very well-rounded class, performing well to above average in pretty much every area of the game. They even have so many niche bits of utility like detecting and disarming traps, or lockpicking doors or boxes. But it's something special to the Rogue which I want to pick on here, and that is their poisons. Or to be more specific, their damage dealing poisons. Their utility poisons, especially crippling and mind numbing, are amazing and can find so many uses in PvP and PvE. But then the poisons which are meant to do damage just kind of aren't very good, unfortunately. And it's a similar issue to what plagues Hunter with their spell power scaling abilities, and that is poisons don't scale. But for Rogue it's actually worse. So the whole spell power Rogue thing, which again you might have heard of where Rogues scale with this stat, appears to be a bit of an alternative server happy accident. Maybe there was a patch or two where this worked on Blizzard servers, but on 1.12 it just doesn't work this way. So you know what Rogue poisons scale with? Nothing. Not spell power, not attack power, just straight up nothing. I mean, okay, we can say they scale with spell rank, you get a new rank, they do more damage, and you can put 5 points into the vile poison talent in the assassination tree to make them do 20% more damage. But the highest rank of instant poison does about 130 damage on average. Do you want to spend 5 talent points so it maybe does about 150 damage each time it procs? Speaking of procs, poisons of course have charges in vanilla. The max rank of instant poison has 115 charges, so you're going to be be reapplying these fairly often if you are regularly using them. And then of course there's deadly poison as well, which wouldn't have ever been functional during vanilla group content due to the debuff cap, and if you were solo by the time it was at 5 stacks, whatever you're fighting is going to be pretty much dead. But wait, there's more. Poisons are considered temporary weapon buffs, so they don't stack with things such as sharpening stones or even wind fury, and if you put poison on a weapon, there are only 2 ways to get rid of it: wait 30 minutes or use up all the charges. I bet every Horde rogue player has accidentally used a poison on their main hand when grouped with a shaman, only to realise they just scammed themselves out of wind fury for a long time. I do really like the whole RPG side of creating your own poisons and it being a mini profession, and I was sad to see this go for rogues in Wrath of the Lich King. But for Blizzard to actually make poisons viable in Season of Discovery, for example, they had to create a room where poisons scaled with attack power and are just automatically applied on your weapon without you actually having to use them. At number 4 we have an ability from the Paladin, a class which nearly escaped being picked from this video at all, because although they have so many weird abilities, a lot of them do find uses within the game. But as somebody who's played a lot of Paladin throughout vanilla, there is one ability which I will happily call bad, despite it being one of the cooler ones, and that is Hammer of Wrath. This is one of your higher level abilities, with it not being available till level 44, so you kind of hope it will be good. Hammer of Wrath is Paladin's execute ability with a 1-second cast time, where it throws a hammer dealing moderate holy damage at an enemy at 20% health or less on a 6-second cooldown. So where do the problems start here? Probably on it having a cast time. Having a cast time as a melee is a bit of a disaster, as spells always reset your swing timer, meaning when you're toe-to-toe with an enemy, it is very rarely better to use Hammer of Wrath rather than just waiting for your weapon to swing again. In fact, I remember in TBC that tier 6 had a set bonus that increased the damage of Hammer of Wrath, and it was still completely unusable in PvE. Maybe you get one right at the end of the fight if nothing else could fit in the global. A 1-second cast is quite a commitment too. Not only is it interrupting your melee swing, but you're also subject to spell knockback during this time as well. Its mana cost is also just disproportionately high, being 425 at max rank. If you use a few of those, you're gonna be Of course, it's a spell, so it scales with spell power, which only protection is going to have in vanilla realistically. Remember, healing gear only gives plus healing in vanilla, and Ret is not really gonna have any spell power either. Apart from the fact that protection is probably going to be getting hit in the face, so they can never use Hammer of Wrath due to spell knockback. Blizzard did try to buff Hammer of Wrath in Season of Discovery, making it instant, and so it resets its cooldown when damaging a low health enemy, but it's still not used because it just costs too much mana. All in all though, you may snipe the odd mob running at low health, or get someone before they escape in PvP with Hammer of Wrath, but oftentimes it's just not worth the effort. Now we're heading into the top 3 territory for some truly bad abilities. At number 3 it's the second visit from the Hunter class, and this time around it's Mongoose Bite. So Mongoose Bite works in a similar way to Warrior's Overpower or Rogue's Riposte, where it needs to proc. The conditional here is that the Hunter must dodge an attack. However, unlike those 2 aforementioned abilities, both of which are very good, Mongoose Bite does not do weapon damage plus something extra. It just does the something extra part. Mongoose Bite rank 1 does 25 damage. Just 25, nothing else. At max rank it does 115. And that's the payoff for having dodged an attack, by the way. Fireball rank 4 that you get at level 18 does more damage than this. I mean, sure you can macro Mongoose Bite into other stuff and not really think about it again, but it's always felt as though you're just losing out on mana whenever you press this ability to do a truly pitiful amount of damage. If it did weapon damage plus something extra, it would be very good, but as it is at the moment, I honestly don't even buy it. It just feels like a waste of gold until I'm at endgame, I have spare gold, and I think, oh, I didn't buy this yet. So overall, I think Mongoose Bite is worthy of the 3rd spot. At number 2, we're welcoming back the Druid for an ability which, when you read more about it, it just gets worse and worse. And this is one of their key tanking abilities too, which is Swipe. And we're talking about Burst Swipe here. Cat Swipe is either Season of Discovery or Wrath and Beyond. So let's talk about it. It's your key AoE threat generator that costs a pretty sizable 20 rage to use, and it will hit up to 3 nearby targets for about 80 damage at max rank, which sounds okay, until you realise for some absolutely insane reason that it doesn't scale with attack power, so the damage that it says it's going to do on the tooltip is what it does, and that will be the same when you first learn this, or you're in Bis Gear. With some of the other abilities it kind of makes sense why there's no scaling, but here there's just no logic that this one specific ability gains so few benefits from gearing up. I mean, Bear Druids do remain strong on single target, but with Swipe swipe doing barely any damage and being capped at 3 targets as well, they can definitely struggle more on AoE, especially when any class with AoE decides to do more than just breathe on whatever you're fighting. All in all, swipe is just in a strange place where I feel it's so much worse than it possibly could be, so that's why I'm picking it here, which means that the number 1 spot is going to be Warlock for a talent which I can only describe by saying, why did you do this, Blizzard? So the entire of the demonology tree is a bit confusing. It has you spend 20 points on making your demon stronger, and then it says, okay, now sacrifice your demon to gain various buffs. It worked this way in TBC as well, by the way. The demonology tree also features plenty of 5-point talents which do practically nothing. 5 points for 15% mana on your demon, another 5 for 15% health, and another 5 for 20% auto attack damage. That's 15 points which go practically in the bin. I think only Balance Druid could compete with this number of dead talents, and that's without you potentially spending another 5 points on improved Subjugate Demon to buff this spell, which is very occasionally useful, apart from the fact that it still breaks all the time. But all the talents in this tree and other abilities in this video pale before what is the worst of the worst in vanilla, and that is the talent Improved Spellstone. Have you ever actually used Spellstone in vanilla? I'm not entirely sure that I have. There are scenarios where I've considered it, but it just wasn't worth using. With the talent though, it would absorb 1200 spell damage when you use it, which is honestly great, but then here come the downsides. First of all, Spellstone and Firestone for that matter are offhands in vanilla, so after you conjure them you have to wait the equip cooldown before you can use them, and they'll disappear if you log out for too long. When you use Spellstone, it removes all magical effects on you. A bunch of world buffs, consumes, and other class buffs are magical effects, which makes this a big no-no. And probably the single biggest issue with this talent is that it is the only talent in the game which for some inexplicable reason shares a row with a capstone talent, meaning even if you did want to take it, you have to way overinvest talent points in this tree to be able to do so. Overall, the downsides of Spellstone are just way too great to use it all that often. It takes up an item slot, and to get the talent you're going to be going at least 32 points into Demonology, which can stop you from picking as many good talents in the other trees. The Demonology tree as a whole is a bit of a mess, to be honest, and Improved Spellstone is just the cherry on top of this entire spec. And I think that's just about it. 10 of the absolute worst abilities or talents from the vanilla era of the game. Did you notice which class didn't get mentioned here? It was the Mage. The hero class wins again, big surprise. I really didn't think they had anything worthwhile picking. But some of these abilities that I've listed here may have use cases where they are optimal, so if there's ever been a moment where you've thought, wow, we need a Windwall totem here to save the day or something of that sort, let me know in the comments down below. Shout out once again to boot.dev for sponsoring this video. You can check them out for free via the links below and get started on back-end web development today. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.